I say, he's not looking hard enough!
This is an election for class president between the anarchist demagogue Bart Simpson and the teacher's pet Martin Prince. I want you to watch closely and see if you can spot the key moment when the outcome of the election is decided.
The polls will be open from now until the end of recess. Now, just in case any of you have decided to put any thought into this, we'll have our final statements. Martin.
I don't think there's anything left to say.
Bart.
Victory party under the slide! Hey, thanks for your vote, man.
I didn't vote. Voting's for geeks.
Well, you got that right. Thanks for your vote, girls.
We forgot.
Well, don't sweat it. Just so long as a couple of people did. Right, Milhouse? Lewis?
Oh.
Somebody must have voted.
What about you, Bart? Didn't you vote?
Uh-oh. I demand a recount.
1 for Martin, 2 for Martin.
Did you catch it?
The polls will be open from now until the end of recess.
It's when Mrs. Krabappel decided to schedule the election during recess. If she'd scheduled the election during class, everyone would have voted and Bart would have won in a landslide. But because she scheduled the election during recess, only 10% of the eligible voters turned out, and those voters had a decidedly pro-Martin tilt. Scheduling elections when your people are going to show up and your opponent's people aren't works in real life too. And we see it all the time in school board elections. In the United States, we have a day that's called Election Day. That's the Tuesday after the first Monday of November in even-numbered years. Election Day is when we vote for all federal offices, so president, senator, representative, and also, in most states, governor and state legislator as well. But many school districts hold their school board elections on a different day. And this varies a lot from state to state. In most parts of New Jersey, school board elections are in April. In New York City, they're in May. In Ohio, they're in November, but in odd-numbered years instead of even-numbered years. The timing of school board elections is so complex and difficult to systematize that if you go to the Ballotpedia page on the subject, there's a whole category that's just called varies/unknown. And it turns out that whether you hold school board elections on election day or a different day makes a huge difference for how many people show up. So let's take Saline, Michigan, which is about a mile from my house. Saline used to hold its school board elections in May, and in 2003, 29 people showed up. That's 0.2% of registered voters in Saline. Now that was an unusually low turnout year, but let's look at these other years. In 2005, 2,223 voters showed up. That's 12.3% of registered voters. In 2008, it was 14.3% of registered voters. And then in 2010, Saline moved its school board elections to Election Day. And turnout was 58.7% of registered voters. Yes, that's right. Saline quadrupled turnout in school board elections just by moving them to Election Day. Low voter turnout in these off-cycle elections creates a tremendous opportunity for special interest groups to influence who gets elected. In the case of school board elections, that's the teachers' unions and the unions of janitors, bus drivers, school administrators, and other school employees. You might ask, why does low voter turnout give interest groups such a huge advantage in getting their preferred candidates elected? Well, there's a couple reasons. First, the people who are members of these groups tend to be the people who would show up to vote no matter when you scheduled the election. Look at it this way. If your company was holding an election for who would be your boss, would you figure out when the election was going to be, and would you show up to vote? Of course, anyone would. Well, school boards run the public schools. School employees, by voting in school board elections, can elect their own bosses. So of course they're going to vote, just like any of us would. Second, interest groups don't just sit around hoping that their people will show up and vote. They send them letters and call them on the phone and send volunteers to knock on their doors to remind them of when this election is going to be and which candidate they're supposed to support. Those mobilization efforts make a much bigger difference in low turnout elections. And sure enough, school boards that hold their elections off cycle pay their teachers about 2% more. So it should come as no surprise that whenever a state legislature considers moving its school board elections to election day, you can count on the teachers union mobilizing to oppose the move. Of course, nobody ever argues that we should have school board elections off cycle because that makes life easier for the teachers unions. No, they argue that off cycle elections ensure that the people who are voting in school board elections actually care about the school board elections. You see, people get really excited about who the president is. So when they go to vote, that's what's top of mind. What happens when they get their ballot and it has candidates for a bunch of other offices on it too? Well, what a lot of people will do is try to figure out which candidate for each of those other offices is the most aligned with their preferred presidential candidate. That approach to voting has had a profound influence on our politics. If you look up and down American government, Congress, governors, state legislators, city councils, more and more, you see politicians dividing themselves into two warring camps based on whether they support or oppose the incumbent president. And you have to ask yourself, is that really how we want to run our school board elections? As referenda on whether Donald Trump or Joe Biden or whoever it happens to be is doing a good job? Don't we want to actually look at how our local schools are doing and at the qualifications of the candidates and use that to decide who should be on the school board? That was the logic of the progressives who moved most school board elections off cycle about 100 years ago. They didn't want school board elections to be opening acts and concerts headlined by the struggle for which party will control the federal government or the governor's mansion. They wanted these elections to get their own day so that people would have the time and the space and the quiet to focus on the issues facing local schools. And if that meant that voter turnout was going to be low because only a few people care enough about local schools to show up to vote in school board elections, so be it. If you think about it, that's where The Simpsons landed on this issue. Martin and Wendell were the two voters who took the election the most seriously and had the strongest grasp of the issues. The recess election may have suppressed voter turnout, but it's hard to argue that the class would have been better off with Bart.
In a sample taken in this very classroom, a state inspector found 1.74 parts per million of asbestos.
That's not enough. We demand more asbestos. More asbestos. More asbestos. More asbestos. More asbestos. More asbestos.
But you don't have to take your cues from The Simpsons. What do you think? Are off-cycle elections a useful tool for ensuring that important local elections are decided by the people who actually care about the issues? Or are they a dirty trick, a way of handing power over to special interest groups by making it harder for people to participate in important elections that affect their communities? Let me know what you think in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.